This is incredibly exciting, and before I go any further, thank you very much for listening. Now, I've been really inspired by the talks that I've heard during today, and I've learned a lot by simply listening and being involved. And that's something I've come to understand over a long, long period of time. Listening and engaging with people helps me to learn about people, about lives, about environments, about places. And when I decided I was going to study architecture, I was actually pretty young. And I loved to be a part of everything that was around me. To touch things, to feel spaces, to experience the smell of compost and soil, to build huts out of old pallets in the garden, and to experiment with soil roofs and building ash pathways, just to see what would happen when the next rainstorm came along. And I was lucky, because when I went to study architecture, I was not really taught anything at all. But I was given the opportunity to choose my own projects, to write my own briefs, and to test whatever I wanted. Now, to be put in a position where you're to write and curate your own future for the first time away from the security of family and friends is actually a pretty daunting task for any 18-year-old. And whilst we'd not necessarily have to actually design buildings themselves, everything we did had to be rigorous, authentic, and contextual. And it had to have meaning. It had to relate to people. And when we graduated, we received a certificate. And not many people know this, but we also received a crystal ball. As architects need to be able to see the future, as everything we do will be in the future, will shape the future. Now, I recently saw a t-shirt, and on the t-shirt it said architect, a person that can solve problems that you don't even know that you have, in ways that you cannot possibly understand. See also magician and wizard. That's brilliant, yeah? Well, I also recently listened to a very influential politician talking about Britain leaving the European Union and saying it will be all right, and explain how it's all about business. Well, I'm not so sure it really is all about business. I wonder if the communities that we create today and have created in the past really are all about business. Certainly business has a huge influence on everything that we do in many different ways, but can it really be all about business? No. What if it was all about people? What if it was all about the environment that we're in, this place where we are now, this very moment that we're all experiencing together? These sounds, these tastes, these feelings, this energy. What if it was all about context, community, love and joy, all about people? Well, I actually think it is. I think it's all about people. And I truly believe that we're all connected by layer upon layer of experience, of life, of joy, of sadness, of hard times, of friendships and energy, incredibly powerful energy. And what if architecture was not only all about buildings, but about the space in between the buildings? One of the best pieces of advice I was ever given is to be naive in what you do. And I think that actually one of the most useful things when you study architecture is that your main goal is to learn how to learn. So how can we use this in our everyday lives? Well, firstly, I believe we can all be lucky. We're lucky enough to have projects across the world. We're currently building cinemas in Lahore, in Pakistan. We're currently building schools in the UK. We're building villas at 2,500 meters above sea level in the Pakistani mountains. We're building an off-grid hotel resort in Tanzania, an incredible apartment building here in Prague in the Czech Republic. We're master planning cities and communities, shaping people's lives, building and designing the very fabric upon which the future will be founded. And it's a pretty responsible position that we've been given. Now, something I was lucky enough to learn about is that we all need to be given responsibility. Responsibility to live and to grow, to communicate with one another and to share. And over time, I've learned to understand that sharing really is a wonderful thing. When we share something, we feel really something satisfactory. And in fact, we often feel even better when we not only share it, just give it away. Now, I'll tell you a secret. Architects are not always good at listening. In fact, at certain times, they can be a pretty arrogant bunch. So what would happen if we were to use the ideas of listening, sharing, engaging, respecting, and learning to create architecture? Well, that's exactly what we strive to do all the time. And I'll show you some examples. When we design a school, we often receive a brief, and the brief will often tell us there needs to be X amount of classrooms, Y types of uses, within a minimum budget of N-1, of course. Yeah? Well, this is all very helpful. This is really good stuff. But what about the people? What about the context? What about the community? What about the future? Well, we've worked out that an amazing way for us to create a school is to engage ourselves in the whole school community, to really immerse ourselves. And we do this in many different ways. We carry out workshops, for example, where pupils are asked to think about what their ideal school would be, how they would like to learn. And then we work with them, and we create drawings and we build models, and they love it. This is a real project, real life, and it absolutely influences the work that we will do in creating a site-specific project for their school. Now, in one school, there was a problem of bullying. Now, this usually happened in confined spaces, such as toilets. So how can architecture help solve this? Well, the kids had a solution, of course. They suggested, well, why don't we have mixed toilets? The boys never really bully in front of the girls, and the girls are far more polite in front of the boys. So we created mixed toilets, and the outcome has been astounding. Not only is there far less bullying in the school, but actually they love the toilets. Not just for hiding in, but for using as toilets. Now, we spend real time with children. We spend real time in the community, and we listen and we develop ideas. We create wish lists, and this experience is incredibly, incredibly inspiring. This empowers people. And we are able to distill the ideas that we hear and connect them into the context, the community, the aspirations of all that are involved in the whole project. And of course, we're able to bring our ideas to the table and our experience to the table. And together, every project reflects the local community, the people, the context. People take responsibility for their future. Now, another example of where public engagement with context and the consultation are key parts, and where they're key parts of the design process, is a project we're building on the amazing island of Zanzibar. It's an incredible place, a spice island, a true spice island, authentic Africa, with a history, though, that's so unique, so complex, that it was actually really hard to know where do we start at all with this. So our approach was to go back to basics, to ground ourselves in the diversity of the island itself, to smell the soil, to taste the water, to experience the diverse community, how they live, to listen to their aspirations and ideas, their fears, and to involve the local community as much as possible so that they really do benefit from the work that we will do there. So our vision was to be as authentic as possible, to really talk and design a project about Zanzibar. And it was about spices such as this, cinnamon, which is for them just the bark, the common bark of one of their common trees. It's a place where we wanted to really meet local people and for people to enjoy their community. And to hopefully protect, and if we're lucky, even improve their local environment, to create opportunity and employment, to help them with basic things such as providing fresh drinking water, as now they just drink water that's salty from wells, and maybe put a roof on the local school so that they can really teach during the monsoon season. And from the very beginning, the client and our team regularly met with the local community. We've engaged them in the planning process. We've understood that simple things like providing an access route to the sea allows them to be self-sustainable in terms of their food and maintaining their traditional businesses of boat building and fishing. We've endeavored to use local materials wherever possible, such as palm leaf and grass roofs, and building walls out of the rocks that we simply find on the site itself. Timber comes from local sources, but they have to prove themselves to be supplying sustainably. We're employing mostly local people, relearning their own traditional life skills, which is such an example, building the coral stone walls, or thatching roofs with palm leaf makuti. And it's beautiful to watch. There are as many women on the building site as there are men. And frequently, in Africa, they sing as they work. Now, as there's no mains water supply, no source of stable electricity, there's no waste disposal facilities. We have to develop sustainable systems which are completely off-grid. And Every drop of water that we use comes from the site itself, from wells that have been dug. And we use desalination processes using ozone to absolutely minimize the use of any chemicals and keep the water alive. Having understood from the local community there are limited supplies of young plants on the island, the first thing we did was to set up a plant nursery on site and to cultivate the tens of thousands of plants that would be needed to be used for the project. A team of local people have been gathering seeds and cuttings for over 2 years, and every single plant that could be retained or moved on the site is being used. We've learned how they create shading for young plants using banana trees, which of course in addition provide an essential source of food for the local community. We've learned how they plant vegetables in raised seed beds to control irrigation and prevent flooding during the rainy seasons. And they have learned the importance of planting new trees for their children and grandchildren to guarantee food supplies for the future and maybe provide financial income. And we're learning how we can teach them and work with them to learn new languages so they can evolve and be involved in our global community. And we learn to respect and preserve their history and culture that's evolved over centuries. We've spent days in local villages collecting waste plastic and reusing bottles to plant the delicate seedlings that will be used in the project. No longer are the villages full of discarded plastic, but it's being put to use again to create an authentic spice garden grown by the local community. This engagement and sharing of knowledge truly creates an authentic and sustainable experience. And I wonder, why do we not hear singing on our building sites in Europe? Well, we have a number of residential projects right here in Prague at the moment. And we aim to not only integrate our ideas into the existing local community, we aim to be welcomed and created by them, by that community. Now, public consultation does not, of course, happen in many different situations across the world, but frequently it only happens once the design work is complete and even planning permissions have been submitted. We want to involve the local community from the very beginning, engage with them. Now, I've talked about context and community in other projects, and I believe in residential projects this is more important than ever. Now, in one project, the client started with a vision of creating a green building. Now, of course, there's many ways to create a green building that's more sustainable. You can insulate them well. You can use recycled materials. You can use geothermal energy, solar power, so on. But what about the people? What do they want from living in that specific place in Prague? Well, the answer is they wanted a family house with a garden in a tight-knit community, such as an apartment building. So how could we deliver this? Well, we broke down the basic idea of an apartment building into what is in essence a series of floor slabs that float one above another. And then we took the idea of a family house with a garden and slotted these in between the floor slabs. By extending the balconies, we could create enough space for a small garden. And by adding depth to the edge of the balcony, we could then gather rainwater from the roof, and we could plant larger bushes and trees on every level of the building. And then, by tweaking the facade elements and optimizing the orientation for both daylight and visibility, we're able to create a building which is literally green from top to bottom. And this gives the people that live there the opportunity and responsibility to look after their gardens and their surroundings. Now, there will be a generous park created as part of the project. And like in the schools or the hotel in Zanzibar, by listening to the local community, this architecture will help the local community to grow a special relationship with the environment that they live in the future. Now, I have another short story to tell you. My wife, for my birthday, treated me with a gift, which was entry into the Ústí nad Labem half marathon in the Czech Republic. Now, my wife is truly my inspiration, okay? She thought this was a wonderful present. There was just one thing. I don't run. And a half marathon is just over 21 kilometers of running, and it's hard running. But it was a truly fantastic gift. Now, I'd run 10 kilometers before, once. So the only way to do this was to start running, of course. So I trained and I ran most weeks, and eventually 10 kilometers was no longer so hard after all. Nearer the time, I felt that I was more and more confident I was going to manage that 21 kilometers, and that really was achievable. And on the actual day of the half marathon, I realized I felt better than I'd ever felt for years and years. And that was not only because I was fitter and healthier, but because I believed in myself. Now, I told you my wife really is my inspiration. Anyway, I ran the whole race, and I experienced just over 2 hours of really shared public space. And I'd never experienced anything like that before. Grandmothers clapped from their apartment windows up above. People sang, they danced, they sung, they beat drums, and hundreds of children stood on the sidelines trying to high-five as many of the runners as they ran by. Amazing. Such an amazing enthusiasm and generosity from all those local people that had come out of their homes into their streets to support, in the rain, a complete group of strangers to run. Now, every single person that was there, they stood on the streets and they had pride for their city. They were enjoying and creating spaces which were full of life and energy and, above all, generosity. The space had transformed from a run-down industrial town created by people who did not listen to a place full of life and respect. Now, I already said that I believe we really are one people, and by engaging with their context and architects, listening, involving the public and consulting with the local communities, together we're able to create places which are full of life, energy, authenticity, and inspiration. So maybe that is a crystal clear vision for the future. Thank you.